Welcome. You are at the CCC,
where there are no outside issues. My name is Anthony. I'm a 7th-year doctoral student in clinical psych, an addict and alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and of course, I care about you.
Yes, and I'm LouiLou, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm a former Castro Country Club. I am in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we will provide and create a brave space where we can engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
Our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please remember to like, share, and comment about this episode. Ding that bell.
Ding, ding, ding. And now, the disclaimer. Ooh. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on At the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The material and information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we are just friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Hi, Louis.
Hi.
I missed you.
I know, I missed you. I was in the airport, I was gonna watch the episode, and then I realized I wasn't on. I didn't even have any reason to watch it. No, I'm kidding. I was traveling, so it's like there was no way to.
Well, you were missed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Your absence was felt.
But Manny's fabulous. I love Manny.
Manny was absolutely fabulous. And I was just talking to Manny last week, and he said he'd be down to cut back on. We had a really great conversation, and hopefully you'll be here for that one.
Absolutely. Finances, that's a topic that, I know I'm not alone. It's something that we all can appreciate.
Yeah, we're not going to share our credit scores or anything like that. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually good. I met with my sponsor and my sponsee today. I haven't, because of the last couple of weeks, I haven't really been doing, my routine has been thrown off, which is a good thing because I was in Palm Springs last week. It was lovely.
Yeah,
the weather was great.
What was so great about Palm Springs?
Doing nothing. When I travel, I don't bookend. I kind of just kick back, enjoy myself, and it was just really nice. I don't want to live. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to live in Palm Springs. That's not my groove. But I think sometimes it's really important to kind of move at a slower pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because here it's without knowing, it's you're constantly run. I'm thinking everything needs to get done. How about you? How are you?
So I was just having a moment because I was like, wow, Louis really knows how to travel because every single time I travel, so I don't like to organize things when it comes to my leisure. So I end up traveling with people who are super organized, but then I get very resentful because everything's organized and everything's bookend and there's no room to breathe because there's we're going to this thing and this thing and this thing.
I think, you know what? So I think that some of that is good. I like the idea of being with folks who have a plan. When we were in Hawaii, there were some folks who knew exactly what they wanted to do.
Yeah, but you could dip in and out of that.
Exactly. But I think it comes down to, and we were talking about this before, it's I have to be clear on my boundaries. You can invite me all day, but if I'm not down to do it, I'm not down to do it. Just like that last day, I stayed in and I watched TV. I watched Bravo. I was of course I'm in Hawaii, but guess what? I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah. So I'm good. Yeah.
Are you really?
You did what you asked me though. So, but I'm good. I have a writing deadline coming up. My dissertation proposal is due on June 30th, and I'm well on my way there. I'm just have one more chapter to kind of clean up, and then what else is going on?
Let me ask you something.
What?
Okay, I know that this is not even on the topic, but now that you started up the writing again, do you feel like the time that you took off was
100%?
Okay, that's
100%. I'm exactly where I needed to be. Or rather need to be.
Yeah, because if you were with us back then, this bitch was batshit crazy.
I really was. I was losing my fucking mind. I really was losing my mind.
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad that your mind is still here with us because we need it.
Okay. So, sometimes I listen to us and I'm like, man, I'm so uptight. I want to be more on your level.
You know what? I think it has.
Do you drink before you come on?
Pretty much. I am wasted right now. No. So here's the deal. Pretty much. Okay. So I look at you and I think about back when I was your age, and maybe younger. And I'm not saying we're that far off.
Go on.
But I used to be really uptight. My friends would say, you shove a lump of coal up my butt and I'd spit out a diamond. We're both Virgos and rigid in our thinking. And I think that one of the gifts of recovery and actually active addiction was getting over myself. and I'm not, it's different for other people, but I've had to go through it. It was coming out. It was all of that stuff that kind of helped me to get over myself, because I used to think that I was perfect.
Yeah.
All right. And not even that I was perfect, that I had to be perfect.
Are we still talking about me?
No, I'm talking about myself. It's like, wow. It's like, okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Let's talk about Anthony.
No. I mean, that's a good segue into today's topic.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking, today's a continuation of body image issues or body in general. And the reason why we decided to continue on this conversation is because there were a lot of great things that came out of, the last time we did this. And I'm sorry I keep hitting the table. I'm going to hear it from Brandon later. So there were a bunch of things. And one of the things that I thought was worth returning to was the idea of having safety in our body, like feeling calm within our body. And before we turned on the camera, I was telling Louis that what I think is interesting about body image issues, or like body image in general, is that what I think we're actually talking about are internal experiences that we create for ourselves based on the images that we put out for people. And I think a really good example of this, kind of the epitome of this, would be like drag, right? I think in drag performers, all the ones that I know, they realize what they're doing. They're in control of the image they're creating. They know how people are going to respond to that image, and they know how to use the characters that they make to kind of exist in the world, right?
Absolutely.
And to some degree, I think that we do that in our everyday lives, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what were you thinking?
No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah, and so rounding off that thought, so I was thinking about like, what are all the different ways that people are in relationship with their bodies in an attempt to create something for themselves. So I think, for example, if we think about kind of the obsession with like working out, what's that about? Is that about creating an internal experience? And by obsession, I don't mean to pathologize working out, but what I do mean to say is that a preoccupation with what my body looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's, if I'm following, it's like these external things. I mean, especially living in this neighborhood, I have come to the conclusion that a lot of the things that motivated me to go to the gym at the time, or to want to go to the gym, is because of all of the people around. Like, because nobody was telling me I had to be this or I had to be that, but the images, what I saw, and what was being so readily acceptable. And so, I wasn't spiritually sound, as they will, and so I bought into it. And then I thought I needed to go to the gym, or I needed to not eat all the time, or whatever. And boy, we're just screwed up.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I can relate to, right? Like, for example, growing up, I had a lot of disordered eating, and to some degree, like as a sober person, I have to be very careful about my relationship to food. So yes, I do work out, but my motivations for working out these days, or eating differently these days, is very different from when I was younger, right? There was a time, for example, where I was obsessed with the idea of getting sexual attention from other men, right? And to some degree, that there is a part of me that does like enjoy getting attention, but I often question myself, like, what is that about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what is it? Like, could I survive, for example, if I didn't get this kind of attention? I had a conversation with someone in the rooms recently, who's aging, who is like noticing that like they've started to bald, and that their body is not behaving the way that it used to. And they've been really anxious and super depressed about it. And one of the things he said was like, I didn't realize how much of my self-esteem was tied up with how other people saw me. Right. And so, I think to myself, like, is it possible to have self-esteem if I'm not constantly being affirmed by the external world, right? Because it doesn't, like, I do this a lot less with like my body these days, but I've done it in other ways. Like, growing up, I was so craved for attention, and I knew I would get attention if I did really well academically, or if I got into like a lot of different leadership positions, like I'd get praise from people around me, right? And so much of the things that I was doing was about creating something for the world to respond favorably to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like, it comes down to a lot of things, like constantly having to check my motivation for things. Like, to the question, like, can I have self-esteem? Can I have self-esteem without those external? thing about it is I say I'm going to the gym for my health. I'm doing this for my health or whatever. And all of a sudden I start looking good. And then people start commenting or whatever. I feel like I've constantly got to be checking my motives for what I'm doing. Like, I think it's possible to have it, but I think it's really important that, like, the two, it's interesting because it's like the two almost go hand in hand. Like, I do good for money, people are going to acknowledge it. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that, you know. It's like a reassurance.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to be attractive.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely not.
You just have to be attractive for yourself. You know, it's like yeah.
Yeah, I think so. In part, I think the first part of that is like seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like one of the things that I really appreciate about recovery is developing self-esteem. Right. Mm-hmm. We talk about, you know, in order to have self-esteem, we have to do esteemable acts. Uh-huh. Right. And what I've noticed is that when I'm actually actively engaged with doing things that are not about me, right? If I'm volunteering or if I'm being of service in another way, I notice that like how I feel about myself actually is being inspired kind of like internally. I'm not necessarily looking for the world to tell me anything. I'm having these like unique experiences with people. And in fact, actually when I'm like connecting, having sincere connections with other people, really kind of everything else feels secondary.
Absolutely. I think that the work that we do in recovery, in 12 steps specifically, I feel like we're like detectives, and we're working at getting in the roots and the causes of what causes our like conflict. And when we work through those things, it's like, it almost like seems like everything else kind of falls into place. Like when I am constantly in, you know, thinking about like, well, not, I won't say it, I'm constantly thinking about me, but thinking about ways that I can improve me, or that I can address the issues that are before me, like anxiety, other things like that. It benefits me. And then other areas that I thought needed to be addressed in certain ways don't need to, because they are addressed because I'm dealing with, you know, I'm gaining my self-esteem. I'm gaining my self-confidence and me back, because I'm working on areas that were lost. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get that. Can we reverse a little bit and talk about anxiety a little bit?
Oh yeah.
So when you experience anxiety, where do you experience that in your body?
I will experience it around here and
in your chest,
in my
for
chest,
people who will be listening.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's like in my chest. I was rubbing my chest. I'm all, ooh. Yeah, I feel it in my chest because it shows up. My anxiety attacks shows up where it becomes a struggle to breathe. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the fears that I've always had was like suffocation. Mm. And I don't know, I was talking about that with my sponsor today about anxiety and how it shows up. And it shows up so kind of haphazardly. It comes in and whatever. But the thing is, I have to address it now because it's kind of affecting how I think about things like travel and other things, because I'm oh my God. You know how when you have memories of the anxiety, and every time I'm in a situation like that, I think it's going to come back, and I don't know if it's actual real or if it's just 100%. Of my creation. So it's like, yeah.
Absolutely. I think
that's another show, because I got to talk about anxiety.
Anxiety, maybe. Yeah. Because I wanted to talk a little bit about anxiety too. Like I experience anxiety also in my chest, and what's interesting to me is I've been actively working on addressing my anxiety, like separating the actual physical sensation of anxiety from like the narrative that's generally attached to it. Mm-hmm. And what I'm noticing is that as I am like breathing more into that anxiety, or I'm being more open with people about that anxiety. Like, for example, yesterday, I called a mutual friend of ours, and I was like really anxious about something, and my like thoughts were spinning, and I was talking to them, and I started sobbing during the call. And I didn't realize that that's actually what I needed. You know, I needed to have the physical sensation of actually getting something outside of myself, getting it out of me, right? And I think the way that this relates to body image issues is because I noticed that sometimes some of my fears and my anxieties have to do with judging my body. You know, sometimes it's like one of the major reasons why I don't like social media is because I'm constantly being fucking bombarded with like with like all these different types of bodies, and I start to compare myself, or I start to see all of these different lives being lived. And like, what's crazy is that like, I'm an educated person. Like, this is my wheelhouse. I'm in the profession of like mental health. And even then, you know, like these messages kind of like, they slowly kind of seep in. And before I know it, I'm like, why do I fucking hate myself? You know, or like, or why do I feel envious or jealous? And so part of like my healing around like comparing my body to other bodies has been one, like figuring out, like one is like silencing the noise around that, right? Because the anxiety originates in most cases in like the thought patterns, right? So it's been like getting, like meditating, being honest with like friends about like the kind of thoughts that I've been having, right? And then the other part of that has been like sitting with what's actually happening inside of me physically and being kind and like breathing through all of that.
That's really heavy. Like I think in what you said, what I feel like the gift that we have now that we're clear of substances and what have you, is getting to a place where we're able to be honest about what it is. Because I think, like with our feelings about our body and whatever, and even anxiety, there's shame around it.
Yeah.
Like what I find, like when I'm experiencing these anxiety attacks, what is most frustrating is the fact that it's not a tangible thing that someone can see. So a lot of times it's like folks have either dismissed it as nothing. Like an example is like, I struggle with like when I get onto the plane, when the door closes, it doesn't happen all the time. I have little tricks that I do, but sometimes my anxiety takes off. And then I stand up and usually it's like, okay, I have this momentary thought, like, do I get off and catch another flight or not go? And I know that it's going to pass, but it doesn't feel like when I'm in it. And one of the tricks that I have, if I haven't taken a couple of Benadryls just to quiet my head, I get up and I walk the aisle, or I stand, and I've seen, or at least I felt like I've seen a reaction from folks, and that is just the worst and the loneliest and the most discomfort that I feel, and it makes me question whether or not, it makes me think about it. Like every time I think about travel and things like that, I think about it in those terms.
So that's, you said some really important stuff there. And I think one of the things that you said that I'm relating to is, I know it's going to leave, although in the moment it doesn't feel like it's going to leave. Right. Can you remember the first time when you actually had the experience that proved to you that it was going to shift? Because I'm thinking for myself, you know, the hardest thing for me, So like I think about, for example, comparing my body to other bodies, right? Mm-hmm. I can remember being a teenager. So I grew up in like in a pretty affluent area, and there were a lot of white people. And I can remember growing up and like hating myself. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't look like all the guys around me, and all the guys around me were like blonde and blue eyed, and like their bodies looked different than mine. And I'm telling you, I can remember hating my body. And I remember this one time I came out when I was really young. I was 14 years old, and I was involved in this young gay youth group. And I can remember there was this one guy who came in who like basically looked like every gay boy I've ever seen in like a magazine, and everyone was obsessed with him and everyone talked about him. And I can remember leaving that room and crying because I was like, oh my God, it's being confirmed for me. You know what I mean? And that to me is so tricky, because it's interesting, because on one end I'm like, oh, I want to be fawned over. Yeah. I want to look like this person, or is it that I want this kind of attention, and like, why do I want this kind of attention? And so much of that is like tied up in that, right? There's like internalized racism there. There's like the erotic life of racism. There's like the sexualization of bodies, and what bodies get to be sexualized, right? Like, is being sexualized a privilege? And, you know, we talk a lot about, for example, preferences, right? I hear that. There was this great talk I went to many years ago. It was called The Erotic Life of Racism. It was being hosted at Berkeley Law. And they were talking about how people talked about preferences. Mm-hmm. Well, I just prefer white men. or, I prefer X, Y, and Z, right? And that it's not racist because it's just a preference.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I may have shared this before. I remember it was probably before I started working with the black sponsor that I had at the time when I needed to go through some stuff. I was struggling with me and my own identity. And I remember getting out of the shower and I wiped all dramatic. I wiped the kind of condensation from the mirror and whatever. And I asked myself the question, am I judging me as value worthy based on me, or am I doing that based on me as a black man? Am I looking in there and am I seeing a person who I don't feel is desirable because I'm a black man, or am I, and it was, I almost feel like that was the beginning of my journey, that was really the beginning, like I'm all thinking, what messages, what kind of narrative am I getting that is causing me to kind of not feel comfortable in my skin,
Right. I was thinking about, for example, like for the longest time, you'd see things like on people's profiles that said like no fats, no femmes, right? And it's problematic for a bunch of different reasons. But I was thinking about kind of like the transition of like the change of beauty standards, right? Yeah. Like what we call beautiful today is not necessarily what was called literally like 60 years ago. Like these things are constantly morphing, and so one of the things that like I've said before is that beauty standards are selected for, right? Like these are things that are kind of molded culturally over time. And there are actually very few things that are universal. I think one of the kind of the universal things is like signs of health. Signs of health kind of translate across like the universe, the country. I don't know what people are doing on Mars, but you know what I mean? Like the universe. But you talked about, I think the subtext of one of the things you were saying was like inherent value, right? So can you say a little bit about that? Like what have you done to kind of get to a place where you've like, I actually have inherent value? Is that a heavy question?
No.
Should we come back to it?
Well, I don't think it's there are a number of steps, and there are a number of steps and along with those steps, time. Like it's kind of constantly putting, like I found myself at one point, like without knowing, I made it a point to surround myself with other people of color. Mm-hmm. Whether or not I was running from or avoiding, it's like kind of like turning off the TV or turning off social media. Mm-hmm. These were things that I was being exposed with and things that were challenging me and things that were causing me discomfort. So I needed to kind of step away and put myself in situations and scenarios, like allowing myself to be around people who valued me, who showed me through their actions and through their words that I mattered, and not kind of letting this voice in my head be louder, because it wasn't that the people, the non people of color that I was around were telling me at all. Maybe they were just, it was through their actions, because that's how we learn. We learn. Everybody was on the same bullshit kind of cycle where, just like you said, the one individual that was the standard or whatever, whatever. I constantly seeing those things, so I was avoiding being around those things and surrounding myself with people of other colors and cultures that I deemed beautiful, and really kind of trying to living in that, and
I love that. Yeah. One of the things that I think about is like, I think about like, what am I feeding myself?
Yeah.
Right. So there was, for example, a time when I did have social media where like I would follow like every thirst trap, right? Like there's, like I tend to kind of have a type, and I would like only follow guys who fit into that type. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed like, it was weird. I think there's maybe like a different experience for gay men, but I'll speak for myself, because like as a gay man, I have the option of being with that other man, or I can compare myself to that other man, or I can tell myself, do I want to be him? Yeah. Do I hate him? Do I love him? Yeah, right? Like it gets really complicated. I don't know. I can't see that being the same for like heterosexual couples. Like, I don't know that there's like,
but it probably is.
Yeah, probably some version of it.
Yeah. You know how we have little mantras. I used to tell myself like, just because there are folks who are interested in me that I'm not interested in them. I have to pay attention to that. Meaning, just because somebody is not into me doesn't mean that I'm not desirable. I heard that message somewhere, and that's something that I hold on to all the time. Just because that person's not into me does not mean that I'm not worthy of being loved or whatever. It just means that person is not into me, and
yeah,
I don't do it perfectly. But I was gonna make this comment. So the whole thing with preferences and profile. I remember one time I was so annoyed with all that I changed my profile. I said, I'm really looking for exotic people. I'm not into pasty white. I used counter language because I was just so angry, and that's just as bad, because I was like, what I've learned or what I appreciate is like, you can have preferences as much as you want to. You don't have to post them. And I was thinking that to me is privilege, that you get to say, I don't want this, and that, because I would just block everybody. It's like, come on, if you give me a list of what you don't want, and the worst was, I'm sorry, this is a detour. You got all this stuff in there, and then you send me a message. What is that telling me? That I'm your consolation, and I decided I ain't nobody's consolation. If you told me that you're not really into black guys, good, thank you. Why did you send me a message? Because I'm black. Right. I'm black as night, like the comic book, okay? Yeah. For people who can't see me, I'm black.
So for people who can't see me, so I want to kind of like shift this a little bit.
I love it. He's shifted, baby.
So I want to shift it a little bit, and I think part of one of the things that I like about where I'm at now these days is that I've had the experience of people who are like in their power, right? I hate to use this kind of language, but they're in their power, but they aren't trying to take anything from anyone else.
Absolutely.
Right. So these are people, for example, who, like they look great or they have wonderful lives, but these are people who are not doing it at the expense of everyone else. These are not people who are only exclusively talking to one type of person, right? These are people who have all types of friends, or they keep all kinds of company, et cetera. And what I realized, and that is like, my sense is that in my own experience, that when I am feeling good with myself, when I'm right with myself, like I find that I actually feel like more open-minded, and I feel more adventurous, and I feel more like welcoming. And the other thing I notice is that like the more I love the people around me, there is this kind of dying away of the body, which is really interesting, which is, I also, again, like I don't want to talk about the body like it's this bad thing. But the positives around this have been like,
or maybe the obsession with the body.
Yeah, like the obsession and the comparisons with the body.
And that's so right. I mean, I think that we get that. It's like I have so many people in my life right now that I absolutely love and adore, and I know that they love and adore me, and I don't stress. Like when I closed my membership, and I decided no longer to pay a fat tax, especially since I wasn't really taking action to make those changes. I had to get right with like what was going on. And it was easy because I've got all these people around me who love me and accept me, or maybe they just accept me as fat. We wouldn't know how to handle it. Go ahead.
But yeah, well, I think like part of that is, I'm mindful of like my tone here, and I don't mean to like imply or suggest that there are all these kind of negative things about having a body or being in a body. What I am trying to kind of like acknowledge is that it can be very complicated.
Oh yeah.
And that in relationships with bodies being complicated, that there are ways of enjoying and finding peace inside of your body, either looking at it or being like living inside of it.
Peace inside but somebody else's body.
Yeah. And that'll be our next episode.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about that. So like, what are maybe some things that you've done that have helped you feel good about yourself?
Getting sober.
Yeah. Okay.
Getting sober and doing the work to get to know me. I think that a lot of me before, I was kind of what we're talking about. I was living for other people. I was judging myself based on how other people were showing up or how I thought other people want, and making choices like before I came out, not acting on me being gay because I was so concerned about how the rest of the world would receive me, specifically my family and like close friends. And when I got to a place where I was like, you know what? I need to be happy. I need to find I need to find myself and live. And that has made like that. I think that coming out was the beginning. Like we talked about kind of earlier where, you were feeling a little uptight. Was that off air?
Yeah. No, I think that was on air. Like when you went in.
Yeah, it was. And when I went in, exactly. It was the beginning of me changing that part of me was getting honest with who I was. Mm-hmm. And getting on that. I mean, I feel like that saved me, especially through the darkest time of my depression and my addiction, was that piece of me being a gay man or identifying a gay man because it was the only identity I had, or at least that I was owning up to.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that, like just across the board, like one of the kind of ways that like addiction or like the disease of addiction comes up for me is like the feeling of not being enough, just in general, like, and what has helped me out of that has been like in all things that I do. And this is a kind of, with everything that I do, I try to do it in the service of God and the service of other people. Right. I remember years ago, so I've shared about this before. My sponsor's very healthy. She's much older and she still looks great. And I remember years ago asking her, like, how is it that you do this? And she said, like, I don't do it for myself. Like, I do it in service of being healthy so that I can be of service to other people, And it's the same thing with my research. It's like, I could approach my research as like someone who's like looking to win awards, or I can sincerely think about my research as work that's going to actually help other people.
That is so true. Like when I talk to people about me doing drag and what have you, it's like I'm not interested in doing drag at bars and whatever. Not that there's anything wrong. You can do drag however you want to. But I realize that when I do it for the recovery community, when I do it like that, and I do it for the people in the audience because I love them, it's like I get so much more from that experience. So it's like when I apply that to other areas, it's like if my motivation, again, back to motivation, if my motivation is on point, then, I find more success in the things that I'm like kind of attempting.
Yeah, I think, when I think about recovery, if that's like one of the things that defines it for me is that living a sober life, a life that's centered in recovery, in this case, like the 12 steps and with the idea of serving a higher power, that to me is the defining characteristic in a lot of ways. It's a life that isn't selfish. Right. It's a life that really is about bettering the lives of other people. And to be short, it's not about like being a doormat. It's not about helping others at the expense of myself, but it's about finding joy and connecting with other people. And I really think like across the board, literally across the board, that is when I'm happiest. I'm happiest.
Beautiful paradox.
Yeah, it's this like, weird, it is a paradox. Yeah, it's like everything, like I think about like when I change my relationship to food, and I change my relationship to working out, and I change my relationship to sex and intimacy or meetings or like you name it, like my like academic or professional like endeavors. When I change my relationship kind of singularly about like serving God or living my life's purpose through these things, all of that started to shift for me.
This ties to like our a while back we talked about the only thing you have to change is everything.
Right.
What you said, when I change my relationship to it, it's not that I have to change it, I have to change my relationship to it.
Right. And when I wake up in the morning and I say, like God, use me to do your work, right? Like everything that comes after that, if that is the spirit in which I'm approaching my life, right? There really is no room there for me to kind of turn. I mean, I'm a human, right? So as a human, I'm gonna occasionally like
have moments
where
and then you get
where ego gets involved.
And you get to not beat yourself up senselessly when you have those moments because you are human. I like to say that. I like to say, you know what, I'm human and therefore fallible, and I am going to have those moments. But the key is not to stay in those moments. I get to have them, but I don't stay in them.
Yeah, that is so tough. Maybe that needs to be the next episode. Is like, why is Anthony so uptight?
No.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
No, the next episode should be, why is Anthony so self-centered? He's like, why is Anthony so this, that?
But yeah, I mean, that is like, in general, that is, it's something that I've been working on. It's like, I'm wound so tight.
I love it. You always give me these wonderful sound bites.
So Bonnie Violet will like clip it and show it to the world, and the world will be like, Anthony believes he's uptight. But that's certainly something that like that's certainly something I've been working on, right? Like related to my body or not at all. Is just like, I am wound so tight, and I think a lot of the things that I'm wound tight around, they've been really protective. A lot of it has been around like, how do I protect myself from being hurt by other people or the world, or like, and really it's about like, how can I make it safe to be in my mind and in my body? And I think like, the beginning of that is like learning to kind of untangle, loosen up. And, I feel like I've been on this quote unquote journey for like the last year and a half. And part of that has been like establishing friendships with people that I typically wouldn't hang out with.
Absolutely. Are you saying you wouldn't normally hang out with me?
That's not what I said.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a comment before we start wrapping things up. Anka writes, I really started working on self-compassion as I age, and my outside self is no longer shiny and sparkly like I was before. Ageism is real, and our culture glorifies youth and beauty.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Anka.
Honestly, I've been thinking about like my life in relation to the fact that like I'm 52 years old, I'm going to be 53, and I'm thinking instead of spending time thinking that I get to move forward, I'm thinking, oh God, I've used up the time and nothing good's going to come from it. And the only way that I get out of it is when I see amazing people who are older and living and doing the things that I want to do and doing them now. How sometimes we start our lives a little later. Yeah. It's like,
one of the things, and we can start wrapping up the visual part of the podcast. But one of the things that I really appreciate is people who are aging gracefully. And the way I interpret that is by people who they like take care of themselves, right? Like for example, I'm treading lightly here because I don't want to say anything that's like offensive accidentally. But I'm thinking here, for example, is like I know some older gay men in my life, and like they talk a lot about like how they just feel invisible and they feel ugly and undesirable. And at the same time, these are like people who generally like don't take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying like you have to go to the gym 5 days a week. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm thinking about like, they don't take care of themselves like spiritually or
like take advantage of the, like, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Right. But then there's some people that I know in the program who are older and like, they're effervescent. You know what I mean? They they're so captivating.
Flawless.
Right. Like, and it isn't because they're doing anything extraordinary, but it's because it's clear to me that these people have really loving relationships with themselves.
Exactly.
And these are people who I've experienced who are like gracious to other people. You know what I mean? Who like, they're just kind, they're kind and compassionate.
I have an image of that one person, but I don't
I think we're talking about the same person.
I have an image and I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Oh, you said him. I'm thinking of a her.
I'm thinking there's
a lot of
There's a him and a her. There's a bunch of him and her.
There's a bunch of them. And
there's a him and a hers.
And I think like that's one of the things too, is that like we all have to age.
We do.
Like we all have to age, and we have to live in these bodies until we die.
Yeah.
And so like, how can we live in our bodies until we die and be okay? You know what I mean? And feel happy and content and fulfilled.
I don't know. I'm sorry that we're leaving this visual part of this on such a downer.
It doesn't.
How do we live in these bodies then?
But I feel like we've answered that question a few ways. I've
I
talked
tell you
about
what,
being of service. I've talked about...
Yeah, we don't just go to sleep. We wake up and we do the work that we're doing now. I mean, I think that we talk about it. We don't encourage you today at all. If you're feeling it, talk about it. Find some trusting person, because I think that is so important, to have somebody who can relate or write it down or whatever. Don't hold on to it, because the shame that's in that is kind of the shame that will really do us in.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that, Louis.
I just had to say, because I was feeling something. I had a moment.
Yeah, my sponsor always says it's better to say it out than to think it in, right? And And maybe that's a conversation that you start with, like your concept of a power that's greater than yourself. If you don't have a God, find a God. If you're an atheist, find something that's bigger than you. It's a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So should we start wrapping up, Louis? Because
well, I thought we were. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking over at Brandon. I was waiting.
Yeah, so I just want you to know the Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
And our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all of the ways to contact us at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We go live in the Castro Country Club Facebook, YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yes.
Hey, so I realize we still have some time. So I was, you know how like the new episodes are starting to show up on Spotify and stuff like that, and they have like the last 15 minutes. I really like them.
I know it's.
That
cool.
was like,
yeah,
I was
cool.
like, oh wow, this is like interesting. And I realize this is kind of like selfish because I'm talking about us, but I was like, oh, I forgot that we had this like conversation afterward.
I know exactly. Yeah, no, I still do my little thing, and it was really excited because the new episodes, I do my thing at work where I listen to the old episodes, and it's interesting. It's interesting when we teach ourselves.
Yeah,
like, I'm all, did I say that? And I realized, my higher power is working through me.
Yeah, well, a lot of times I will find with you generally, like I'm listening and I'm like, oh shit, like that was a really good point, Louis, and typically that's followed by a text.
Yeah, exactly. We text each other and say, "Oh
hey,
my God,
good job!"
And then especially, I know we're all feeding each other. And then also the funny parts, because it's like we make each other laugh, which is a really funny thing.
Yeah, we do make each other laugh.
Yeah.
And we just ended this episode with, "This is how much I love you, Louis."
I love you too. It's like, oh my God, see, self-love.
Yeah,
love, self-love. How shady was that?
Brandon was like, button.
Brandon said, Brandon, I'm waiting for the day when he starts cutting our mics. Like, we're all.
Can I close this?
Yeah, you can close that.
Yeah, I love when we don't have to look at ourselves.
I know, because it's like, that's tough.
That's so funny. It's so interesting. This took a different turn than I was expecting.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You know how when we always start talking, and then it may end up sex, God, and but they're all, these things are all connected.
Yeah, no, I think they are all connected. Sometimes I wonder to this idea of like being wound tight, right? Like sometimes when I'm on, I try to be really careful to not like shape an entire conversation around like maybe feelings that I might be having. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I also think that's part of that's one way of having a conversation, is about being real with what's coming up for ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when it certainly has been my experience, like during meetings when people are being raw about what's happening for themselves, that like I'm connecting.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And
so wait, when you know how you're talking about being wound tight or whatever, are you thinking you're wound tight as compared to someone else, or are you feeling wound tight for yourself?
Well, it's about myself. So being, real here. So like the things that I've been really so I'm working on a 4th step in SLAA. And the thing that like I'm noticing is like how much shit I have around sexuality. So around sex, around relationships, around intimacy. And I'm wound so tight. So tight.
And how long have you been doing this work?
You mean like in the rooms?
No, and specifically.
Oh, like specifically this stuff? This is relatively new, I think.
What would you tell one of your clients?
My clients? Yeah, I mean, you're so sweet, Louis.
Yeah.
Like I would say like, this is what it feels like to be new about this. You know what I mean? And it's going to take time. I think, like being honest with myself, it's like, this stuff has been very, very, very hard. I was telling you this before we started recording, that like when it comes to like sex and love, addiction, or things around sex and love, like that stuff to me is the hardest shit I've ever had to work on. Hardest stuff I've ever had to work on, be it around like be it like addiction to pornography or addiction to sex or being confused around what love is and like sexualizing anxiety and not knowing whether or not I'm really connected or like that kind of stuff is so complicated for me. And I noticed the thing where I'm wound tight is like all the ideas that I have around that. Right? Like all the different things that I've been telling myself for such a long time. You know, one of the things that's been helping me recently is, I'm being judicious about my self-disclosure here, is like, you know, I'm in a situation now where like I really care about someone and I'm noticing like these old things are creeping up and I'm so careful because I don't want to push this person away. And one of the things that's been really helpful for me and to kind of neutralize and water it down is to acknowledge how many times I've had these feelings, you know, because then it's not about the other person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then it's right. Then it's about like, no, I've been carrying this with me for such a long time, you know, and part of the confusing thing for me is like not knowing what is normal sometimes. Right. Like I'm not criticizing. Well, sometimes I criticize how I feel and I think, which is not, you know, a good habit. And I have therapy and I have sponsors. But what gets really difficult for me sometimes is like not knowing what fucking normal or healthy looks or sounds like or feels like.
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of shit that drives me crazy. And all of the different things I have in place to kind of keep myself protected because, you know, there's so much fear.
Mm. I'm listening to you and I'm appreciating what you're going through and realizing that I don't have it that bad.
Yeah.
No. Maybe because I'm just not.
I'm putting in my letter of resignation.
No. No.
We all have our own things.
No, we do have our own things. We absolutely do. And this is something, you know, honestly, it's like it may even be, it's not even that I don't have it. That's not what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
You know, and I respect that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I think that you could give yourself a pat on the back because you were doing the work.
I am
because
doing
you could
the
stay
work.
stuck in there.
I could stay stuck.
Sex and sexuality and relationships, that's it. It's what's interesting is that you can't take it like some things when it needs to be repaired, you can take it to the shop and have it fixed on.
Right.
And you can separate it from, but I'm always in relationship and I am a sexual being, so I'm always wanting to have sex. I always have the thing in place so that I could do the hookups. Even if I know that I am a disaster. You know, I'm not saying you're a disaster, but
sure.
You know,
I'm not a disaster.
We have episodes and episodes of no, you're not.
You know, let's talk about that for a second because I noticed that whenever you've criticized anything that I've said about relationships or love or things like that, it makes me want to not talk about it on air.
Ooh, I'm sorry. It's like actually, you know what? It's like I mentioned it, and because I told you before, I'm like with my sponsors, I'm like a lawyer, and I was like, you brought it up, I'm gonna bring it up again. So let me just say that it is never my intention to kind of keep you from talking about it. You know, that's not it. I think it's just like you said. Sometimes I'm so quick, and I don't think about what I say, and that is something that I get to work on.
You are really quick.
Yes, it's like it comes out before. By the time I realize what I said, it's already past my lips, and I can't do anything about it. And so I have to kind of have moments like this where I'm called on it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate your response. We're having a moment that's being recorded. I really appreciate that because you know the other part of that for me is, I think part of it for me is also like getting me to like. Not directly, but what I try to get myself to do is to take myself a lot less seriously, right? Because that's ultimately what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like these really raw parts of myself that like need to constantly be calmed down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that.
And you know what? And the levity that I bring, it is important to note that it is not that I don't take myself that seriously. It's just that, you know, sometimes for my sanity, I always say it's like if you don't laugh about things, sometimes your head will explode.
Absolutely.
Like I have this, and this ties into our conversation. It's like I don't cry in public. I don't do certain things in public because and whether or not it's guarded, I'm still not still don't feel completely safe to let my guard down and show.
Oh, that's real.
People. And it's like, and whatever it is, what am I worried about? What people might think? I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. And right now, I don't ask the question because it works for me.
I totally get that. Oh my gosh, I totally get that. That like not letting your guard down. That's interesting because my experience of you is that you actually are quite fearless in social spaces.
That's what I'm showing people. That's what I'm giving people. I don't know that I'm as fearless as folks think. I'm acting as if. I'm acting as if, and it just I probably do it more effectively than others, which is amazing because we're all addicts and we've all put on these masks to do faces and shown people what we think they want to see. And sometimes we get away with it so long that we stay stuck in our stupidity.
You know what I really like? So you in your gratitude list, you talked about, I'm not going to say the person's name, but this person's share at Show of Shows. What I loved about his share was, he's wonderful share, great speaker. And he was talking about, and he makes his life sound so great. Yeah. And toward the end, he goes basically like, that's not what his life looks like. Exactly. That it's like generally like he was, and it was so, and I think there was like this crazy laughter because we all got it.
Yeah, exactly.
We all got it. We were like, because it's true, like at least for me, I'm one of these people that believes like as an addict and an alcoholic that my brain is constantly doing like crazy things. And although he painted this kind of like beautiful and serene life, he was like, this is not what my life looks like. This is on my best day. I probably don't do half of the shit that I told you that I do. Right. And I love that. Right. Like that to me, I find so much peace and relief and like the laughter around just how fucking nuts we all are. And that to some degree, it's certainly like I look around and I think we're all just kind of like doing the best that we can with like the way we showed up.
We're a bunch of bozos on the bus, like
a bunch of bozos on the bus, or pillars on the bus,
or pillars.
A bunch of pillars on the bus.
Pillars on the bus.
Yeah, but we are a bunch of bozos on the bus, and Billy, he usually sends out in his gratitude list, like where everyone's doing the best.
Exactly, we're just doing the best again. What's interesting? Since we're talking about gratitude list, I was talking to my sponsor, and I'm making changes as to how I participate in the gratitude list.
Oh yeah.
Because I was like, checking my motives. I was like, what are you doing? It's like I wake up and then I've got this huge distribution list and whatever, and it becomes work. So it's like I made some changes. Like I'm going to focus in on a few things that I'm grateful for, including rethinking my intentions, and I may not send them out every day. Sometimes my gratitude will have to be my actions because I can't let something that could be just so amazingly like helpful for me become the thing that hurts me.
Yeah, I think I think about that like with respect to the Bible or any kind of religious texts about how these texts are these beautiful things like 12 Step or the Big Book, or how there are these beautiful works of art that uplift and strengthen people, and how when human egos get involved, we find a way of using them against each other. And I used to do it with service. Like,
absolutely.
What I mean? Like
service. I was a motherfucker for service. Like, Are you kidding? It's like, I used to get mad, like at the big meeting, the Sunday meeting. Yeah. Like I would be putting chairs away. I'm of service, and I get mad at people. Like, look, if you're not putting chairs away when you talk, get out of my way. And I would be shoving people, and like, I'm all thinking, you're an asshole. It's like, and the truth of it is like, it's not about whether or not somebody else is being of service. It's about, am I being of service, and I'm being of service for the right reason? Right. I don't have to put chairs away. I get to put chairs away, and then while I get to do that, I don't get to think about what somebody else is not doing.
Right. Well, we were talking about like the spiritual timekeeper. So for folks who may not be familiar, a spiritual timekeeper is basically someone who sets a timer during shares from the floor.
So that people don't talk for.
So people don't talk for too long. Brandon was mentioning how, maybe I shouldn't say Brandon, but we were talking about, you saw how my voice went up there.
It went all high.
So we were talking about how we were talking about how even being a spiritual timekeeper, how even ego can get involved in spiritual timekeeping. timekeeping. And Brandon brought up the point how like one of the ways that you can see that played out is like someone will make it a point to play something that might be funny or catching. And basically after someone shares what they've done, once the sound goes off, if they've taken the attention off of the person and it goes back to them. And as the spiritual timekeeper, where does the attention always go back once the time goes off? It goes back to them, right? And so that's interesting to me. It's timekeeping. You're literally setting off an alarm and you've managed to make that about you instead of being of service.
Absolutely.
I really thought he was going to turn us off because I saw his hand going forward.
He saw, stop saying my name.
Stop saying my name. There was one other thing.
Oh my God, I was at work yesterday and I have a name tag, like a name tag with my name on it, retail, whatever.
Yeah.
So I changed I changed it to just my initials because if I'm having a shit day, I don't need you saying my name over and again. And there was a guy, he kept saying my name. And I was thinking to myself, it's like, I was going to, thank God he came over and fixed it. He said, let me introduce myself. He introduced himself, but I was going to say, do you know me? Why do you keep saying my name? So, how many more times are you going to say my name? I'm telling you anyway.
Wait, why was he? Because you needed your help or something?
It was a customer. No, he was really nice. It ended up being really nice, but too often what happens is it's a power dynamic.
I feel that.
You got folks who come in like, girl.
Well, I had an experience here recently. Now we're just like gossiping. So I was volunteering. It wasn't this Sunday. It was 2 Sundays ago. There was a guy who tried to pay with a $100 bill. We're not breaking a $100 bill. We don't even have that money in the drawer half of the time. So this guy tries to break a $100 bill. And I say to him, hey, we can't break this $100 bill. Like literally was buying like chips. And I'm like, I'm not breaking a $100 bill for chips. So he goes, okay, fine. I'll just have the coffee. So he takes the coffee, goes, while he's at the thing, he spills coffee all over the trash area. And he goes, hey, you have to clean this up now. I was like, I can't believe people. And he said it with like, in a way where it was like, got you, queen.
I thought you weren't going to tell anybody about what I just did. I was like, gotcha, queen.
Gotcha, queen. And then just wrapping up our conversation around like ego kind of slipping into other things. But I have seen that show up with like people's gratitude list. There was like one person, like the one thing that kind of always, and everyone's done this, like the one thing for me is like when people they like give shout outs to people's names and like entire events, and it feels like I'm reading a column out of People magazine, or like they're cracking jokes in their gratitude list. And at some point I'm like, is this even
a personal? Yeah.
My favorite is there was one person who would copy paste. They would copy their gratitude list with like this template introduction that made it sound like it was personal. And this one time they like copy pasted and they sent it to me, but like they left names in place and the spacing was off. And I just asked them, I was like, did you just copy and paste this entire conversation? And they were like, yeah, LOL.
LOL. I know and that's what it is in that's why I was like, you know what, maybe you're getting a little carried away, because it's no longer about you sharing your gratitude. It's about, I want somebody to send me a message back saying this was amazing. It's like, I need you to,
Yeah. It's just,
we can take anything and pervert it. We can.
We really
That's
can.
exactly what it is.
We really can.
Like this podcast. We're self-serving.
Self-serving.
I'm kidding.
We have 2 minutes left.
We have 2 minutes.
This was a lot of fun. It's really good. Honest to God, I hate when you're not here.
It
feels so weird to not have you here.
I hate when you're not here too.
Oh,
I don't.
He's going to pull our mics again.
I know, exactly.
But for folks who stay and listen to the last bit, thank you. Thank you for watching the show. And if you weren't watching the show and you're just listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, thank you for listening to us.
And we should continue the conversation. You see us out and about. It's like if there's something you want to talk about,
let us know.
Talk to Anthony.
Yeah, talk to Anthony. And for folks who see, I know this is, at least for me, folks who see me out in public and say hi, thank you so much.
I know, I love that.
That feels really good. It's really nice to hear that, people are listening and getting something from our conversations, that we aren't just sitting up here in a 2-person circle jerk.
That's hot. Is that a circle jerk?
It's not even a circle.
Up?
I don't even know if it's a 2-person circle. I don't know.
Okay.
I think we have 1 minute left. I think we should just cut the mic.
Yeah, let's just cut the mic.
All right.